So, well, I'm going to start. So if you could please let me know if my presentation is being shared. Okay, could you let me know if it's all right, please?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about, well, I'm going to talk about really like the two sides. First of all, how circularity helps and renewable energy move forward, or energy in general, and also how energy helps circularity. So some examples may be one way, some examples may be the other way, but I'm going to focus in the region where I live and I work, that it's Latin American and the Caribbean. So first of all, I think it's very important to get a little bit of context on what's going on in the region. Okay, there it is. So first, there's something important to understand. Latin America, it's a huge region. It has very different conditions. So one of them, and very important, is that they are countries that are being industrialized, but this means their energy consumption it's growing year after year. Some countries like Mexico, like Brazil, they have like Chile, they have been growing 2-3% a year, but countries like Bolivia, like Paraguay, are growing up to 7% a year. So imagine having to have more energy resources, like 7% annually. So this is a lot, and it's a lot of things that have to be happening if we want that change, that increase to be renewable and to be somehow respecting these natural cycles. And then we also have a very important situation in basically all Latin America. Well, I'm just going to say Latin America, but I'm referring to Latin America and the Caribbean. There is a lot of subsidies for energy, well, mainly for electricity. This has happened for decades, and it's still going on, and it's something that it's going to be very difficult to eliminate because, well, it's a political issue. So the thing about subsidies is that, of course, when you want to install renewable energy, or you want to use alternative resources, they have to match or be less, well, a bit cheaper than what you're using right now. But what you're using right now, it's very cheap because you're being subsidized. So it's kind of difficult sometimes for most of the population, at least the residential population, to be able to access to these technologies or to make it feasible. Well, there's also this political situation. Many countries, I mean, it's not something that it's not being talked about a lot in the past years, but some countries have changed to policies where renewables are somehow being supported, but at the same time, no. Just yesterday in Mexico, there was this new regulation stating that combined cycles are now considered clean, you know, with gas, fossil fuel gas. And somehow, well, Mexico is going to reach their energy targets, but it's really going to be something different. And also now there is the point of where we get our energy from. So here I made a little map. So most of the islands in the Caribbean, they use oil for electricity generation. Bolivia, Argentina, and Mexico, our main fuel is gas, natural gas. But this one, the reserves have been going down. So it's going to be a problem because now you're going to have to substitute this gas with something else. And well, there's some countries, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Uruguay, Chile, that they have hydro, but they also have other kinds of renewables, a lot of solar, wind, or biomass. but really most of the region is highly dependent on hydro. Of course, there is the Amazon forest, so there's a lot of water. And has been a problem for the last decade. Water has been decreasing. The rainfall has decreased dramatically. And this is a problem because population is going up, energy consumption is going up, and the natural resources or the less polluting resources like gas or renewable like water are going scarce. So this is a map of the carbon dioxide emissions by continent, well, by country. And as you see, well, here Latin America, it still plays not such a big role, but an important role. But of course, if these natural resources start scarcing, well, there's going to be need for using more with either renewables or fossil fuels. So this is why it's very important to make or help renewables develop as these populations are developing as well and increasing their energy consumption. Now, I want to talk also, I think it's very important to understand the situation of Latin America, of the Caribbean in particular, and Central America. This is a devastating picture of Puerto Rico, a huge hurricane that got into the region a few years ago, and they basically destroyed all their PV installations. The importance of tropicalizing also the technologies to make them ready to these kind of disasters. But well, this region is very complicated because there are a lot of islands, and also they're very small countries. So their power systems are very small. They are interconnected, but not so highly as in Europe, for example. And well, some of these countries, they are starting to have distributed generation, meaning rooftop solar, but it's sometimes very restricted because they are very small power systems, so they are sometimes not as resilient as a large system could be. And well, there's also, it's also a region with a lot of poverty, and there's a lot of immigration to other countries. So, well, I wanted you to understand this context because the next examples, well, they are going to develop in this environment. So first of all, I'm going to talk about Mexico first. So I'm going to talk about different examples. And I try to take examples of different parts of the region. So first of all, what's the situation in Mexico and what I've been working for the last 7 years? It's well, basically how final users can help this energy transition happen. So there have been political complications. So let's say that transition has been going on a lot on behalf of final users. So distributed generation in Mexico is limited to 500 kilowatts. So they are small systems for industries. Just like small industries can actually cover their needs with these kind of systems. There was a regulation in 2017, and from there, well, there was this incentive, net metering. You also have it in Europe, compensating the energy you generate with the energy you consume. And that has helped grow a lot. I mean, there are around 300,000 contracts. We are 46 million users, so of course it's still small, but as I said, out of those 46, 45 are residential subsidized users, so this is not something we can actually use in our homes. And there have been some updates that we developed in the Energy Regulatory Commission to promote, well, there has been this effort to try to get a community solar. It's not a reality yet, but we hope it could be in not such a long time. And well, we also have a problem with infrastructure. I think this is a problem of the whole region. Infrastructure makes it difficult for new projects to arrive. So that's why having all these distributed initiatives from different users, it's very helpful. There are a lot of examples. There's a whole industry that has grown here, but I wanted to point a couple of them. So there is this company called Bright, and they use this product as a service. So what's going on here? We have around 4 million small and medium companies. And usually these companies find it very difficult to survive in a commercial environment. And many companies or many small businesses start, and then in less than 5 years, most of them disappear. And the main cause is their high costs. Electricity is one of them. So they offered, instead of buying the solar panels, they offer you an electricity subscription that assures you like an amount of kilowatts hour per month. So this is very helpful, because even though the regulation allows these kind of users to have distributed generation, solar panels, they can't access it because of the financial problems. They have not sufficient financial support to ask for a loan in a bank. So they can't get it. So basically there are millions of users out there that they cannot get it because of their financial situation. So this product as a service mechanism, well, it's helping these kind of users survive. And of course, they offer a lot of jobs, so this helps the economy in general. Another example is an NGO called Ilu Mexico. So Latin America, it has electrification problems, not as high the rate as in Africa, that only 43% of the population has access to electricity. Here it will go between 97 and 99.7%. It's high, but there is still the problem of reaching this last mile. And a lot of problems is, well, the geography. A lot of forests, mountain ranges, situations that make it difficult for the grid to arrive to these regions. So this NGO has electrified houses with PV systems. And of course, it's helping mainly indigenous communities of different cultures in Mexico, and that are all of them in very remote areas. So I think they are helping a lot, not only helping socially, but also economically to these families or these small businesses. There's also this project of another NGO called ICM, so it's like Mexican in Climate Initiative. And they developed a handbook, a very, very strong and robust handbook about how to make farmers and a group of communal, it's like a group of farmers in rural areas, come together and develop a renewable project. This helps them, well, get a better income, diversity of income, not only from food, but also now energy. And this makes them more resilient to economic problems. So they developed all these analyses and recommendations on the social situation, how to get together, how to decide certain difficulties, also the financial difficulties, technical, economical, political. It's a very complete handbook. So I just wanted to show it as well. And well, all these renewable, well, it not only helps economically, as I said, but of course it's making it an important part of increasing energy and developing energy transition. Now I'm going to move from Mexico to some other part in this region. What do you feel when you see this picture? I don't know, before with my carbon tunnel vision, I used to think, wow, this is amazing. This is the future. This looks beautiful. So much solar power. It's great. But when you get over your carbon tunnel vision And you see a bit further, you see that here on the left, you have agriculture, and then on the back you have a forest, and on the very back you have like a small village. And then you think, well, before those panels were there, what was that? Was it a forest? Was it agriculture? So there's a land use problem. And Puerto Rico, this picture was taken in Puerto Rico. And as I said, Puerto Rico, it's an island. So of course, one of the particularities of an island is you have limited land use. So this next example, it's not something that I have, that there is like a precise place, but it has been happening, only it's not being, let's say, identified. So I think in Europe you have heard a lot of agrivoltaics. So it's this symbiosis between industries, an industry that makes a lot of money, energy, and an industry that usually it's very bad paid, that it's agriculture. So usually it's combining these two industries that they have very, very different kinds of income, well, can help land use improvement. So let's think about the importance. I mean, agrivoltaics has been growing in importance in many parts of the world, but here mainly in Latin America, it's hugely important because so there's a lot of around 30 gigawatts of PV in Latin America. And let's say, I mean, this is just an assumption. This is I use the statistics of Mexico, so I'm going to have to extrapolate them to the whole of Latin America. Let's say that 8 out of those 30 are in rooftop solars. So they are using the land that it's already being used for living or for working and generating. But the rest is ground mounted. This means there's around 110 square kilometers in the whole region that are being used for installing solar panels. And you may say, well, that's a lot of land. But just last year, November, there was the COP of biodiversity. All the countries decided that they were going to protect 30% of their land to protect biodiversity. So, of course, we have the highest count of mega diverse countries. We have around 60% of total wildlife in the world between land and water. So it becomes kind of difficult. You need to protect 30% of your land, but population is growing, industry is growing. So if you want to turn, for example, the case of Guyana, I think it's very interesting. So Guyana is kind of here. It's this not such small country, and it basically works on oil to generate their electricity. So if they want to migrate to generation, to solar, for example, they would have to do something like this. But their SDG strategy is keeping 99.5% of their forests. But guess what? 85% of their territory is a forest. So how do you grow? How do you install these kind of things if you don't have enough space, if you want to protect biodiversity? So this is when agrivoltaics comes along. And it's all about keeping these natural cycles, helping adaptation to climate change. So here's a very small map. It's the arid regions in Latin America. So we have a lot of forests, yes, but we also have a lot of arid regions. And these arid regions are in the tropics mainly, are becoming very difficult for agriculture to develop because of this climate change and this global warming. So what agrivoltaics gives us is this possibility of the panels giving shade to the agriculture systems, and at the same time, the agriculture lowers the temperature of the panels, helping us have a higher efficiency and helping us have more humidity. So you also reduce the amount of water needed. And of course, very important in Latin America, a higher income for the farmers. So it's a nice example of symbiosis that we have here. And well, as I said, it's not being quantified, it's not being identified, but it has to happen in this region. It's happening in some very small villages, but of course, they don't count on the statistics because they haven't raised hand and said, hey, I'm doing agrivoltaics here. So moving away from renewables for a bit, there have been academic studies of the University of Berkeley. In Nicaragua, there was one couple of, well, like around 2017, 2018, about making demand response, or well, in Europe, there's a lot of this mainly for industry, but also they're starting to have this in some very small regions, this possibility of adapting your demand to the needs. So usually power systems, they adapt to the requirements of the demand. But we users don't adapt to, for example, when there is sun, well, I'm going to use it because I know there's a lot of PV. When there is wind, I'm going to use more my energy, and when there is nothing of it, I'm going to stop. We don't use those kind of things. We need well, regulation that helps us have maybe time of use tariffs, meaning having tariffs of different costs around the year. So in this study, it was very interesting that they started a demand response program in Nicaragua, and they found that people were very interested, not only because of the program, but mainly because this program was giving them information, because users don't really understand why they consume so much electricity. So by having information, you are empowering final users because you're helping them understand how they consume. And this is very important because just as storage, energy storage, we know or not all energy storage is kind of very circular, but there are some that are, right? Like thermal storage, for example, that it's just storing heat for the time when you need it. They have become allies of the power grid in this renewable integration. So it's very important to understand that if we want more renewables, if we want more less extraction of materials in the energy sector, well, we need also to adapt. So we can adapt either changing our habits or installing huge storage facilities, circular storage facilities, as I said, water, heat, helping all these kind of different technologies develop. Then there's this project, I would like to get a bit into it. It's very interesting. It was a pilot project, but it has been helping develop biogas a lot in Chile. So it was called Milky Biogas. It was a program of the government of Chile, but it developed a guide for final users to develop and to replicate. So this is, well, a completely circular process. It was a 4-year project. They managed to develop 20 dairy farms. They chose dairy farms because, well, here you can achieve like a whole circularity. So here's the thing, you have cows, they have waste, manure, and they also have the waste that they use from the plants to feed them. And then all this is taken into a biogas, reactor. And here you generate biogas with all this waste. And maybe we already know this kind of technology, but it's very important because you develop different things. So first of all, you get biogas from these reactors. You get electricity. Both biogas and electricity help with pasteurization. So you get the milk from the cow. You need to pasteurize the milk if you want to sell it. So you can use the same biogas and electricity you generate in your farm to develop this let's say, this commercial activity. And then you can also have, well, you have this, use this biogas to move the transport, to transport your milk. And then finally, the residues of this process, they give a fertilizer, a natural fertilizer, kind of a compost, and you can grow your plants that you need to feed the cow with it. So it's kind of a whole circular process that basically these farms are becoming, or have already become, self-sufficient. Because they really don't need any input. Maybe the only input they need is the glass containers for to put the milk and sell it. And so basically the rest of it, it's being developed inside, and it's helping the minerals and the carbon used in agriculture to develop energy to help sell the product you're preparing. So I think it's a very interesting project, because it helps us a lot to understand, well, how, again, agriculture and energy can come together and develop a good circular business model. So this has been going on in many countries, really. There's a lot of biogas going on, but this particular biogas focused on the cows, on the milk dairy farms. It has been very interesting because you can use everything there. It's not just, well, generate biogas and sell it to somebody else, but it's actually using it there to develop your business, your economic activity. And so this has been going on in Chile. It was a very successful program. And again, they developed a very interesting guide to help farmers replicate these activities on their regions. Now I'm going to talk here about another company, and it's kind of weird to see such a big oil company as Petrobras in a circular economy webinar, but it has been a very interesting example in my opinion. So we're going here to Brazil. Brazil has a situation well, it was one of the countries that developed a lot biofuels. You know, first generation biofuels have been very criticized, because first generation biofuels means having farmland to grow corn, maize, and turn it into oil to make biodiesel. So it was a huge development in Brazil, but again, we are talking about land use. So Brazil has the Amazon. The Amazon is reducing. Agriculture, it's needing every day more and more space. And having agriculture to make biofuels, well, it has been always a very critical condition and very criticized. So biofuels have been migrating to this second generation biofuels, that is not growing something to turn it into biofuel, but actually using residues and using waste to make biofuels. So these are second generation biofuels. So, well, there's Petrobras in Brazil. It's the largest oil company, one of the largest in the world. And they have this regulation that 10% of their biodiesel has to, 10% of their diesel has to be biodiesel. So they mix it. They have this mixture between fossil fuel diesel, 90%, and biodiesel, 10%. But this is, again, as I said, generates conflict. So what they are doing here, it's a very interesting statistics. They're using cooking oil. So they are collecting cooking oil with this biofuel association in Brazil, and many small regions are participating in this. And they are helping take all this cooking oil and turn it into biodiesel. So we're talking about that last year, they hit a new record, and they managed to collect 148 million liters of cooking oil in the whole year. So, well, this association published a statement saying that this was a conquest of the circular economy because, well, they are helping it upcycle. So having this waste and turning it into something valuable as diesel. But of course, this, I mean, 148 million liters sounds like a lot, thinking that this comes from houses, this comes from restaurants. So it's like very small amounts getting together and managing this total amount of liters, but they are still a very small percentage. So it's about 2% of all the biodiesel generated in Brazil. But the importance is that this program is growing, and it's literally a national effort because everyone in every region of the country is contributing to it. So I think it's very interesting to see that it can actually happen. There was this company in Mexico that was doing the same in Mexico City a few years ago, but well, participation is crucial. Participation of the community is crucial if you want to really get the chance of collecting this cooking oil. So, well, that's there for a biodiesel. As I said, there are other examples in Latin America, but I think this one has been definitely the most successful of them, and it's continued growing. So now I'm going to change a little bit. Well, biodiesel, of course, is used in the transport systems, and I'm going to change also a little bit to the part of the transport and the problems it's generating in Latin America. I think here something very important to understand is that circularity in regions like Latin America, it's sometimes not envisioned as such, maybe, like I'm going to do circularity because of the environmental conditions, but it's sometimes a matter of necessity. So sometimes you have economic necessity, for example. I mean, having, I don't know, if you go somewhere and repair your shoes, it's not because sometimes maybe you're thinking, oh, I want to be circular, but because you may not have enough money to buy new shoes, so you need to go to the repair shop. So there are repair shops everywhere of any kind of things, and so of course they don't count again. They are not being counted on the how circular a region is, because they are not officially considered circular, but it really happens. It has happened for decades, for always maybe. So something similar is happening with transport. In Latin America, we have a very complicated problem. We have a lot of mega cities. So Mexico City, Bogota, Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo, Santiago, they are huge cities where a large percentage of the country lives in just two or three mega cities in a country, and the rest of the country, it's like very, very small cities. So in these cities, one of the main problems is traffic, traffic jams. Mexico City has become impossible to move in a peak hour. And this has caused a lot of problems. And on the other hand, you say, well, use public transport, but also public transport, it's a very old infrastructure and it has a lot of subsidies. So this means also that they don't get enough money to modernize and expand this public transport infrastructure. So sometimes there's a lot of people that commute for 3 hours to get to their homes. And well, there have been many problems of insecurity and low maintenance. So it's there's also sometimes illegal public transport. Buses are not necessarily regulated, so you can't trust all the buses you can get onto. So this makes it very difficult, really, to decide to not have a car and go to public transport. So most of people decide to have a car, and this of course makes it very complicated. And here, for example, in Mexico City, there was something very interesting. There has been developing for the last 10, 15 years, a region called Santa Fe. So there was this, it was like the business region. So a lot of international companies, corporates, they went to this region, huge buildings, all very nice, all very modern, but with a terrible transport infrastructure. So very small roads to get to a huge place where you can only move by car because there's no a lot of public transport, there's no walking conditions. So it's basically no one wants to live, work there. I mean, everyone wants to work there because the big corporations are there, but no one really wants to go there. So it has become a terrible situation. And there were these companies, well, these people who said, okay, well, let's do something about it, because if we're waiting for public transport to solve the problem, we're going to be here a long time. So they started creating this van pooling. So they are these digital apps where you can subscribe and you buy your ticket digitally. And so it is expensive because it's about 500% the cost of public transport. As I said, it's very subsidized. So again, it's very cheap. So it's more expensive, but at the same time, it's less expensive than having your own car. And of course, being part of the problem, being part of the traffic jams. So they have this, so it's basically for commuting. So it's from Monday to Friday on office hours. They get you to this complicated region of Santa Fe, and then they get you back to different parts of the city. So there are basically there are three companies, and they have been going on for, I think, almost 7-8 years now, and they have been very successful. But these are an example of things that may help in different regions, and even in different parts of Mexico City, for example. They also rent it for businesses. So of course, if a business wants to get all their employees into their office, well, they can rent particularly these kind of vans. This happens a lot in Mexico. There's a lot of businesses that they have their own transport because they know that it's complicated for their users to reach their working facilities. And also, if they even make weekend trips to different small towns around Mexico City. So it's very interesting. They are increasing their portfolio of products. But I think it's a very interesting example of how private, the people decided to solve a problem, a very complicated problem in Latin American countries, that is public transport, right? So now this is this collective private transport. I think it's very interesting, and I think it's something that it's going to be growing a lot in the next years. So, well, these were some examples. Of course, there are a lot of examples of how these circularity approaches are reaching the energy sector, or how energy is helping develop some circularity, circularity in different businesses. And so just as a conclusion, as I said, circularity is desired, but I think it's mainly desired in this region because of the economic necessity of the people. It's a region where at least half of their population of most of these countries are in poverty conditions. Not extreme poverty, that's a lower percentage, but it's still in some kind of poverty or vulnerability, meaning reaching almost the poverty line. And also because of the lack of infrastructure, as I just said. There are very high interest rates to fund projects. So all these necessity of increasing the energy requirements, it's making it complicated for example, circular renewable solutions to get there because of the high interest rates. And in general, I think circularity in energy needs to have a broad approach. So it's not only installing renewables in your country, in your house, sorry, it's having energy efficiency, for example. In this region, air conditioner is our main problem, and having energy efficiency, reducing the amount of energy we use in insulating homes, for example, it's something that it's being practiced, but it's really being practiced very, very slowly. It's moving forward, but not as fast as we need it. And again, mobility, yes, we need cleaner mobility, but we need a lot of cleaner and collective mobility. That's I think one of the biggest challenges in this region. Well, there's this possibility of installing your own generation. It's basically being given in most of the countries in Latin America. But of course, they, well, as I said, maybe sometimes it's not as feasible. And well, finally, we're 670 million inhabitants in Latin America. So imagine all these things I've been talking about. Well, 670 million people, we are in this situation right now. And of course, as I said, this is why these were just very, very small examples, but of course there are many, many more going on out there. Sometimes they are not being quantified, they are not being identified, but they are happening because there's a necessity, an economic necessity, a social necessity for them to happen. And well, I mean, we're still growing, not as fast. We are degrowing, but still growing every year a little bit more. So it's very important for all these circularity approaches to reach and to help energy transition. And well, that would be it. Thank you very much. And I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Valeria. It was a really inspiring lecture that you just gave us. It's a lot of very interesting examples. Some of them we have already some of them in Europe with different approaches, but also some others were really new to me. And it's really glad to have this outlook of the Latin American perspective, especially me being from Mexico originally. I didn't have this information, so I found it really interesting. So if some of the participants have some questions, you can just write it in the chat, or you can open your microphone and ask out loud. So I think we have one question from participants. No.
Okay, so I actually have a question.
Yeah, I have a question here.
All right. So it was a very wonderful lecture. Like you, well, I'm not sure your name isn't Erasme, but I didn't get your name at first. But like you, I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from Jamaica, and I'm currently living in Germany. What I find to be interesting, as you said, one of the impediments in terms of circular economy, it's a matter of necessity as opposed to having that concept that as individual users, we need to be thinking about that. So for me, I think it's more of, I think it needs to be an initiative from top to bottom more than a bottom to top initiative based on the fact that we're of low socioeconomic standing. So my question is, what are the initiatives that we have for access to low interest loans? I know that it was a big conversation for the Prime Minister of Barbados in the last COP conference in terms of having access to low interest loans. I'm not sure if any improvements or any advancements have been made in this regard. So I don't know if you can speak of that, Valley, if you know of any, if there's any tools within that regard.
Well, yeah, definitely. I think it's necessary to have, as I say, access to loans is critical, and it's being very difficult, as you say it now. And I think there have been a lot of efforts to try to get a better low interest loans, but it's well, it's sometimes kind of difficult. Last year, there was this, in the COP of climate change, there was this, this initiative of having a huge fund for natural disasters, right? And later they said, well, yes, but they are not going to be just funds to give, but they are going to be loans. So now you're going to have an interest rate. So I think it's very complicated for these regions to develop infrastructure if they have such high interest rates. I think there have been efforts, for example, as I said, Guyana has been having a lot of efforts to make people actually understand that they do need these loans now. And it's not something that maybe they are going to get in future years, because in future years it's going to be too late. You are going to be switching to fossil fuels if you don't have anything else. There was this situation in Ecuador, for example, if I remember well. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm thinking if it was Ecuador or Colombia, but I think it was Ecuador that they made this, well, they made this project to protect the Amazon forest, but all the countries in the world, they were going to have to be giving them an incentive or an economic aid, because of course they were not extracting all the fossil fuel that was below the forest, because they were protecting biodiversity. But they said, well, help us pay for that, because our people, well, are still poor. So we need those fossil fuels, but we're deciding not to touch them because we're helping biodiversity. But we need to get these carbon credits out there and sell them to be able to earn money because we're protecting biodiversity. So this happened for around 10 years, and the amount of money that they got, it was so low that now they have finally developed infrastructure and they are extracting fossil fuels. And well, all this effort to try to protect biodiversity, it went down because there was no international cooperation for that. So I think international cooperation is key here. I mean, inside the country, as I said, these product as a service programs are going on, for example, in Mexico. They, of course, they can help reduce loans because they understand the solar panel industry and they understand that it's feasible, so they reduce the loans, the interest rates. But it's something that is going on from the private sector, not from the public sector. So I think the public sector has to understand this and on an international matter, because most of these countries, I mean, I could have made also a map of how the debt they have, the international debt, and I'm sure all of them, they were going to be in the high part of the highest debts in the world. So of course you have a huge debt, you are paying interests all year, every year, year after year, and of course developing infrastructure in that situation, it's difficult, or I may say impossible.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you.
we have. Now go ahead, Omar.
No, I was just saying thank you. Thank you, Val, for the response. All right.
Yeah, we have also some comments in the chat box, Valeria, which
Yeah.
I'm very agree with regarding bartering that could be useful in Mexico. I think not only in Mexico, in all Latin America, and even in developed countries, bartering it's an option that needs to be further developed. And also one further comment from Edgar, saying about regarding public policies in Mexico, what covers circular economy policies is the question. And then as founders we should aim for community or politics. Very interesting. So thank you. So what's your take on that, Valeria? Do you think that some public policies in Mexico are covering this circular economy, and what the founders needs to aim, community or more into politics?
Okay, so for the first question, actually on February of this year, the 14th of February, It was published the first circular economy law in Mexico City. And right now in different parts of the country, well, I'm going to say some names, but Chihuahua, Oaxaca, I think Guanajuato, they are working different regions. They are working on their own circular economy policies. Of course, these policies, for example, the one in Mexico City is very focused on single-use plastics, but it has, there is a federal circular economy law that it's being discussed since last year. It's not voted yet, but it's in process. And should we aim for community or politics? I think any problem, circular problem, sustainable economic, has to be aimed from all, let's say, from all the participants in the room. So it has to include politics, it has to include community, it has to include the private sector. So I think that this is why circular economies is so important, because you need to integrate the private sector and their processes to become circular, to help communities also, and well, help final users become more circular as well. You may have this idea of changing, but if you don't have someone to offer you something different, then it's kind of complicated. And community, we, for example, in Mexico, we have indigenous communities that they have like their own law in their region, and they decide things their own way. And they are very interesting sources of how to make community. I mean, the whole world has become so globalized that we are so used to being individuals doing things, having your own car, not sharing a van with somebody else. But there are these very small communities, very native communities in very isolated regions of the country, where really the way they are still making communal decisions and the way they get into community to achieve something, it's amazing. I mean, it's something I think we all should learn from. And of course, politics, it's not something we need to say like, it's not important anymore because they are not helping. No, it's something that as citizens, we have this obligation of continue asking and demanding from politics to take action as well. So I think it's not deciding for one of them, it's making them work together.
Yeah, I have a last question. I will take the opportunity also because I think that that's very true, all you're saying. And I also think that regarding these trade-offs in between, for example, land use and the renewable energies and many other hard decisions that sometimes we need to take regarding investment in energy infrastructure, or for example, there is this case about the aluminum recycling here in Europe, where sometimes it's taking more energy than the benefit that it's getting depending on the energy infrastructure. But this is also because we are focusing mostly in economic indicators. So we are not taking a lot of environmental and social dimension inside. So how do you think, in your experience in Mexico, it's possible to integrate those social and economic dimensions into the decision-making process? Are you already doing that? And if not, what are the challenges into this pathway?
Well, I think there's like these two kinds of circular projects going on, right? The ones that are deciding, okay, I'm going to become circular, what do I have to do? And having all this ESG approach. So like trying to find circularity around environment, social governance. But there's also this circularity that is happening naturally, that it's happening because, as you said, of these social and economic needs. So I think somehow it's happening, and I think pointing them out would be a way to help them. And integrating the social aspect, I think it's something that can happen. And it's something that is happening because you really, well, for example, I mean, if you start a business, if you change a business from linear to circular, you have to understand your context. And in analyzing this context, you will realize that a lot of your, maybe your customers are in some kind of poverty, or in some kind of, well, we have this complex methodology of quantifying poverty in Mexico. But there is there are a lot of people that are considered to be in poverty because they do have a job, but the job has such a low payment that they cannot pay for their basic needs. So this is a problem of millions of people. So I think that it's kind of complicated to miss it out, you know, because it's there, it's huge. You can see it and you can touch it and you can see it every day in everywhere. So I think having this ESG approach in developing a business strategy, I think it may be kind of difficult to miss it out. But definitely, I mean, it's important to always have it in mind if you want to really develop a good circular strategy.
Yes, I really agree. And then we have a last question that I think it worked. Sorry for going a bit late in the timing, but I hope that you have still time, Valeria.
Yeah, don't worry.
There is this last question from Timothy Marcroft about the example that you provide about this the van pooling and the private collective mobility. So the question is there some concerns about the increasing inequality of access to economic opportunities, because only the people that have the means into paying this private collective mobility opportunity will be able to work in those businesses that are already being like not available for the people, disadvantaged people.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, it cannot be the only solution, as I just said. You have to continue promoting public transport and demanding public transport that it's useful and helpful. But public transport is definitely outrun. So there's a lot of people and they have to use it. And sometimes having a car, it's not. Well, I know some places in Europe. Well, I lived in the UK, and having a car there was very complicated, right? You have to pay a lot of taxes to use the highways, and taxes for having your car and your license, that it was very complicated to get, and everything. In places like Mexico, it's really so easy. There's so much informal informal car sellings. So you can buy your car from your neighbor, and it's just like something very easy that everybody does. So having a car, it's not something that really just people in their high status have. Like a lot of people have access to transport, and sometimes they live so far from their work, maybe 3-4 hours, that they have to use their car, because instead of having, I don't know, instead of being 2 or 3 hours in your car, if they go by bus, they may even make 5 or 6 hours. There's people that literally makes 5 hours to reach their home every day if they go by bus. So I think it's definitely not the only solution, but it's very complicated, and it may be, I mean, still paying 50 pesos instead of paying 5 pesos. I mean, 50 pesos, it's 2 euros, a little bit more than 2 euros. This is what people is paying for these private vans. But again, public transport is so subsidized that it really makes it very, very, very cheap. So yeah, I mean, it's not something that everyone is going to be able to pay, but a lot of people, even in poverty conditions, may be able to pay it, because nowadays they are probably spending more time on having a car, but because they don't have an alternative. Is either wasting a lot of money there or not sleeping. So I mean, having a little bit more of time in their life. So I think it's something that would help people having less cars on the streets. I think that's crucial, and having less people in the public transport. I don't know if for example I can pay for one of those vans. Well, there's one people not using the public transport, and maybe making it easier for those that use it. So I think it helps. Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone, but it helps because the problem is very, very large, and it affects everyone, not only low income population, everyone from the lowest to the highest, because we all use the same roads.
Yeah, I agree. The public transport in those big cities, those big metropolises are so overcrowded, it surpassed the capacity. And I think that also, even if it's 300% more expensive, then it's in a middle ground in between. Yeah, having to pay is not more expensive than having a car, because paying the fuel, paying for all what needs to be maintenance of the car, it's even, yeah, you can give this step forward in the middle. So yeah, thank you so much, Valeria. It was really a pleasure. Thanks for joining this circular economy webinar. And yeah, let's keep in touch. It's a lot of really interesting projects that you have already running, and really glad to see those pictures of Mexico and the projects that are, I mean, Mexico and the entire Latin American and Caribbean examples. So it was a really pleasure. Thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining this webinar. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.